So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here tonight. I'd just like to introduce Briar Campbell. She's a dedicated travel nurse and tourism expert. She's got a diploma in nursing, a Bachelor of Tourism Management, and a postgraduate diploma in travel medicine. Brian brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. So Briar's journey began in central London in 2005, and she has since specialised in identifying health risks and providing prevention management for travellers. She's currently at the Wellington Travel Clinic, and she plays a key role in vaccination and health advisory for travel-related issues. As a Kiwi, Briar understands the unique needs of travellers, especially those with IBD, and her travels have taken her across continents, allowing her to connect with cultures while sharing valuable insights on how to stay healthy on the road. So, without holding everyone up any further, I will pass you over to Briar. And if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat box.
Magic. Thanks, Belinda. Certainly tēnā koutou. No mai haere mai ki tēnei hui ko Briar aho. Ngā mihi nui, thanks Belinda and everyone for coming on board tonight. Just have a bit of a chat about all things travel, which is great fun, but also having some IBD, which can or can't be so much fun, depending on individual circumstances. Look, first and foremost, this isn't going to be some academic thing, okay? This is just meant to be a really informal chat about things and hopefully maybe some help for some people out there that are looking to get out there and explore the world. A little bit about me. Yep, as Belinda said, I'm a nurse and I enjoy all things travel, and also really enjoy working with people that may have some medical condition or refugee families and the like. It's certainly part of the travel medicine aspect that I really enjoy. And the take-home message for me is that having IBD shouldn't be a barrier or deter you from even thinking about traveling. You too can, and let's get through to some of this now and have a look what can be involved. And it's great to know that the world's open again. So post-pandemic, although COVID and various virus and things are still lurking around. But in the words of good old Dr. Seuss, you can go anywhere. It can be a little bit challenging. And I think travel, like computers, is great when it goes, but when it doesn't, it can be a little frustrating, a bit scary. But generally, you can do anything. So first and foremost, it's the old adage, but don't leave home without it, okay? Travel insurance is an absolute no-brainer, and regardless of who you are and what health condition you may or may not have. If you have some sort of accident or mishap when you're traveling overseas, it's not going to be cheap, okay? Healthcare costs a bomb, and I think in New Zealand we're pretty lucky, even though our health system may be a little bit broken. We get a lot of stuff that I think people just have no idea what the cost may involve. Having a health condition such as IBD may get a little complicated. It may not be quite so straightforward in terms of getting travel insurance. But the key is that you fully disclose having some form of history. Without it, it may be a problem if you needed to make a claim. Most countries don't have kind of a reciprocal agreement like we do with Australia. Australia does, but it is limited to a few, only absolutes, to be fair. And we all go to Australia. It's our most leading popular destination. But if you were to have some sort of accident, they'll get you to hospital, but they're not going to cover the cost of the ambo. They're not going to provide any private hospital treatment or elective surgery. Most medications won't be free or subsidised, and worst case scenario is they won't cover any funeral costs. But moving on, let's avoid all that. When you're traveling, generally a medical certificate from either your IBD health provider or your GP or your IBD nurse is possibly a good idea for some people, just confirming that you're fit to go. It can be more difficult to get, or your cover may be limited if you're currently undergoing treatments and assessments. You've got some outstanding test results or some investigations going on. You've had some recent hospitalisation or surgery. So getting insurance may be a little bit tricky. You may be able to get it, but it may exclude any IBD related issues. If your IBD is under control, your policy might be, your insurance company might be absolutely A-OK with little additional cost involved. So yeah, the key is that you need to disclose first and foremost. And as I say, if your condition's stable, you'll probably get a policy without even thinking about it. There are different companies out there who provide all sorts of different services. So like anything, shop around. You never know. A company that you'd maybe discarded it comes up trumps. And like anything, check out the small print. Okay, as boring as it is, and things like policies and what have you do involve a lot of information. We've had a couple of instances where one was an Australian, Aussie, one was a Kiwi. They were traveling through Southeast Asia. Both had travel insurance. Well, they thought they did. Well, they did. Both were on the back of motorbikes, which is the kind of mainstay of transport in that part of the world. Both canned out. Both were steering just under $1 million of medical care and treatment. Their insurance policy, yes, but it did exclude moped and motorbike riding. So, yeah, just some takeaway travel insurance guru on that. Good old jabs and stabs. It's really important to check in with your GP in the first instance, perhaps, and if you're going off the beaten track and going on to some more exotic locations and longer term, it would be worthwhile to case out a travel medicine specialist in your neighbourhood. There are standalone travel medicine clinics, and there are also a heap of awesome GPs that run travel clinics within their GP practice. So I strongly urge you to make contact with one of those. But starting with the basics, we always tell all our travellers, regardless of their health history, that we want to make sure that all their national immunisation schedule vaccines are all up to date. And if you don't remember, don't worry. I'm sure mum and dad will be able to fill in the gaps for you on that. And that also includes any annual flu vaccines and COVID vaccines. And what we do know is that COVID and influenza are the two vaccine preventable illnesses that are most likely to affect all travellers. So just your little basic ones like that are important. The general recommendation is to allow for about 6 to 8 weeks before you leave the country. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that it allows time for the vaccines that you may have to kick in and get your immune system ready to go. And this doesn't happen overnight. It takes several days. Some vaccines are also a series, so they take 2 or 3 weeks to complete. And then, of course, you need to wait ideally a little bit of time after that for things to be maximised. Also, allergies can be an issue with any medication, and vaccines are medications. So we want to rule out any possible scenario in that respect. And yeah, the more prepared you can be, the better. Vaccines also aren't cheap. I won't lie to you. They're not subsidised in New Zealand. They're not funded. So your flights might seem like a really good deal by the time you've paid for your jabs and stabs. So yeah, a lot of times we get calls from people that say, "Oh, I'm leaving tomorrow. What do I need? Where can I go?" So yeah, the more advanced, the better. You're doing yourself and everyone a favour, to be fair. Vaccines can be either recommended or they can be required. They can be inactivated or live vaccines. So I'm not going to bore you with too many details about this, and this is something to talk to your travel medicine people. Live vaccines, just to mention briefly though, are the type of vaccines that may be an issue if you have IBD and are taking certain types of medications. And it can get really complicated. And we'll talk more about yellow fever in particular a little bit later on. MMR stands for measles, mumps, rubella, which is part of our national immunisation schedule. And Japanese encephalitis, it's another live vaccine. Yeah, we won't go there. It's not even in Japan, to be fair, but anyway, it's just another live vaccine example. And yeah, as I mentioned, they can have some interactions, and these are just some of the examples, which I'm sure you guys are well aware of already. If you haven't been on some form of immunosuppression for some time, it may be that you are okay to have live vaccines, but you'd probably be looking at about a 3 to 6 month period. It would just depend on what's been happening and how long you've been on the meds and for what purpose, but not to rule it out completely. I'm just going to briefly cover yellow fever. It is a whole new ball game. It is a complicated disease and vaccine. you'll find the disease in these parts of the world. So parts of South America and Sub-Saharan Africa. It's spread by day-biting mozzies with stripy legs, and it can be pretty nasty. You can have a bit of a fever and nausea, vomiting, and be pretty below par, but it can also be very serious and worst case scenario, life-threatening, obviously with liver and heart complications. So you don't want it, basically. It is further complicated by the fact that, yes, this map indicates that where the yellow fever is, but some countries will have yellow fever across the whole country is at risk of disease, whereas other countries, such as Brazil, for example, only parts of Brazil are at risk. So it gets complicated in that respect. It's further complicated where some countries in the world would require you having proof of vaccination if you've been to a yellow fever country of risk. So to give you a local example, Australia, if you've just been, let's say to Uganda in Africa for some time, and you're coming back to New Zealand via Australia, Australia may request that you have proof that you've been vaccinated against yellow fever. And the reason for that is that Australia has the same vector or the same mosquito that can potentially carry yellow fever, the disease. So they've got enough of other stuff. They've got enough snakes and sharks and crocs, and they don't need yellow fever on top of everything else. All right, so that can be an issue. Yellow fever vaccination comes under international health regulations, which is overseen by the World Health Organization. To give the yellow fever vaccine, you need to be an authorised vaccinator and be based at a yellow fever authorised centre. So these are your mainstay travel clinics and your GPs that are authorised vaccinators. If you are even thinking about Africa or South America, I would strongly urge you to book in with somewhere that does yellow fever. And you can easily find out who on the Te Whatu Ora website. You just chuck in yellow fever authorised into the search engine, and that'll spit out the whole list of authorised centres throughout the country. I do know in some provinces, though, there's no one available. So, like the Wairarapa, for example, you would need to come to Wellington or travel to Palmerston in order to get that vaccine on board, if in fact you do opt to have that or need it. As I mentioned briefly, there's border requirements that can get complicated. The certification is also another thing to consider in terms of whether or not you can have the vaccine or not. And a medical exemption may be an option. And this is, it gets incredibly complicated. You may be at risk of the disease, but you're on immunosuppression. So in that instance, we would probably strongly urge that you'd choose a different destination, to be fair. You can't have the vaccine because you can't have it when you're on immunosuppression medication and you are at risk of the disease in country. So that's on a basic level, but it gets a whole lot more complicated than that. If you do get the vaccine, you're issued with the certificate, and it's aptly coloured yellow. It's good for 10. Used to be only good for 10 years, but it's now lifelong cover. So if you've got a period of remission or stability and you're not on any medication or any issue to receive the vaccine, and there is a chance of future travel, it might be worthwhile to get that on board so you're covered for future adventures. We always tell our adventurers to take a photocopy or a phone copy of the certificate. Things do go missing. Ideally, you want to keep it as part of your passport, but things go missing, things get stolen. So at least you've got some sort of additional copy if you find that you're out of it and you're trying to get into a country that may require proof of vaccination. Moving on about the good old mozzies. So mozzies are annoying little buggers, and they're actually the world's most deadliest thing on the planet. So it's not lions or hippos or something like that most people might think. It's the humble mosquito. They carry a swag of different diseases: malaria, yellow fever, chikungunya, Zika. I could go on, but we haven't got all night. They all have different biting styles. Some bite at night, some bite during the day, some do both. And there's not really a heck of a lot to do, but just not getting bitten in the first place is a pretty good start. So there's a few things you can do. Wearing light coloured, loose-fitting clothing to cover your arms and legs if possible. Mozzies are usually low flying, so they're definitely below your knees. They are attracted to big, bright, bold colours and smells. So yeah, if you can tone down your wardrobe a bit, that'd be helpful. Loose clothing, and the reason for that is, you've got a nice flappy shirt or blouse or something on. They don't like things coming at them when there wasn't around, so they tend to move off. There's a whole swag of mozzie repellents on the market, and they're all going to claim to do A, B, C, and D. And just like your travel insurance policy, you want to be looking at the small print. So what you need to look out for is a thing called DEET, D-E-E-T, and that is an active ingredient that you'll see in mosquito repellents, and that's what works. You'll see anything from Bushman, 80%, take everything out within a 50-metre radius, down to 10%, 20% DEET. The mainstay is generally a 30 to 40% DEET, and there's been a lot of studies done on DEET, and the consensus is anything beyond a 40% is no more effective. So why cover yourself in what is effectively a chemical? People, particularly people with sensitive skin, and a lot of intrepid explorers with IBD do have sensitive skin through some of the medications they may be taking. So DEET may not be an option. So instead you could try picaridin. That's the other active ingredient to look out for. So a 20% DEET, 20% picaridin is the optimal percentage. It's a synthetic product, so it's not quite as nasty as DEET. And the other option is oil of lemon eucalyptus, which is also endorsed by the WHO. It can be a bit fringy, I guess, but it's an alternative if you can't tolerate DEET or picaridin. It's not nearly as effective, but it's better than nothing at all. If you're going long term or getting well off the beaten track, you could consider a thing called permethrin, and you can soak your clothing and mozzie nets and things in the stuff, and that works a treat for a lot of people. Often you're traveling to places where mozzies are, where there's a lot of sunshine. So there's often a question, well, I need to be putting sunscreen on as well as mozzie repellent. How do I do that? So the key is to slap on your mozzie repellent first. And what you do need to do is you need to make sure that you potentially need to put on your sunscreen more often. And the reason for that is that the sun protection factor, or the SPF that you'll see on sunscreens, is reduced by 30% when you put on your mozzie repellent. So just bear that in mind. There's absolutely no reduction in the repellent of mozzies, but you just need to be mindful in terms of sunscreen. Malaria is a whole new ball game, and we won't go there tonight. Again, it's all about prevention of being bitten in the first place, but you can also have anti-malarial tablets as well, and that's just something you need to talk to your travel clinic gurus. As is things like rabies and snake bites and all that jazz. There's lots of good stuff out there in the world, but there's some pretty scary stuff too. The good old paperwork. Some people who have IBD or other chronic illnesses may find it helpful to have a letter just summarising their medical history of where things are at, their current status, the medications that they may be taking. And I'm not suggesting a complete history of details of all your pap smears or the fractured noses you had when you were 5. It's just basically about what's relevant in terms of your IBD and what's going on currently. I've mentioned allergies in there as well, just as a bit of a highlight in terms of Southeast Asia. Amazing part of the world, but they do a lot of satays and cook with peanuts and peanut oil. So if you have any hint of a nut allergy, that would be a really good idea to have a chat with someone about that if you were thinking of going to Southeast Asia and how to manage that. For long-term travel when your OEs, which is great. We're seeing a lot more OEs now that the world's open. Having a letter of referral to a local provider or having something jacked up before you leave the country is worthwhile, along with your prescriptions. Your record of vaccines, yellow fever certificate, if that's appropriate. Having that letter in the language of the local language of the destination, if that's relevant. Although you can Google Translate these days, so having an actual hard copy probably isn't relevant when you can just talk to your phone. And as boring as it is, you need to have a plan of attack in case, yeah, the shit hits the fan, no pun intended. Okay, things can go wrong despite they're completely out of your control. You're away from home. It's a stressful situation. If you can just refer to someone or something, then that's really helpful and takes away a bit of that stress at least. Medications, yep, there's enough of them out there, and some people no doubt will rattle whenever they leave the house each morning, but they are important, and you need to keep taking them even though you're having a holiday. So first up, have you got enough? If in doubt, take extra, and always take a lot more than what you may not need. Don't decant them and put them in a flash little pink bottle or a blue bottle, or all in one. Keep them in the original packaging. Put them also in plastic bags. Things don't always stay dry when you're traveling. Have a supply in your checked-in luggage as well as what you carry on. Bags do go missing. Luggage gets lost, delays happen, your backpack gets nicked. Unfortunately, these are aspects of travel that is totally out of our control. And my best friend was telling me once about her colleague recently who I think had been in Greece. He was on his way back to New Zealand. He was coming home via Dubai, and last he heard, his bag was in London. So things can go anywhere, and you're left stranded if you don't have the stuff. There's a swag of medications out there, and you'll be familiar with some of them. To add into the mix, some are brand and some are generic medications. Take home messages, and depending where you are in the world, they may be called different things. But the key is that they're all interchangeable. If it's a brand or a generic name, they're exactly the same drug. They've just got different names. Controlled drugs, so things like your morphines and your codeines, your medicinal cannabis, that sort of thing. That's a whole new kettle of fish again. And the key is that you have a letter explaining that, or providing the rationale, as to with needles and syringes. So with your Humira and Stelara, obviously they are injections, so having a letter would be certainly worthwhile. Drug restrictions and importation of drugs vary from country to country, so it'd be best to check with your embassy first before heading in that part of the world. Allowances as well. People often ask, oh, I'm going for a while, how many tablets can I take without drawing too much unwanted attention to myself? So the general rule is you can take 3 months supply, possibly more, but if in doubt, check with the airlines. Differ as well with that allowance, and also with your destination. Liquid allowances on flights, that's changed a lot over the years. From a medication point of view, it's 100 mils. So for things like your Stelara and Humira, it's not too much of a problem because they're 0.5, I think, of the mil per injection. But just to mention, with regard to keeping them cool, they both need to be kept in the fridge. So when you're traveling, that's not always possible. So you can use Humira. So if you can't put it in some sort of chili bin or esky or something like that, or an ice wallet like diabetics use, you can still use your Humira up to 14 days of it being taken out of the fridge. And Stelara, I'm pretty sure, is up to 30 days. But don't, once you've done that, you can't just use it for a couple of days and then chuck it back in the fridge. You either use it within that 14-day or 30-day period and then ditch the rest. In terms of time zones, we are on the other side of the world compared to a lot of destinations, so it can be a bit tricky adjusting the timing of your medication. Ideally, if you can just tweak things a couple of 3 hours each day that you're in your new zone, then that will get you back on track. It's hard though when you're going short term, to be fair. Excuse me. Okay, so getting out there, trains, planes, automobiles, there's all sorts of ways to get around, and that's half the fun, to be fair. Planes are great because they get you from A to B really quickly. Toilets and facilities aren't always so great, and again, that will depend on the airline. I can tell you now, Qantas prioritises bums on seats as opposed to toilets. In New Zealand, you get a few more toilets and a bit more legroom. Not that I'm getting any shares or anything from Air New Zealand, but yeah, it varies from airline to airline. Just to bear that in mind. You can get these little cards from various Crohn's, colitis support networks and organisations, which are pretty handy that you can just flash out. And for the most part, I think people are pretty understanding. And let you, when you got to go, you got to go. And yeah, you've got to be a pretty hard person if you're not going to let someone through. When you're traveling on the road, great fun, the old roadies. always worthwhile if you can, just to make the most or check out the location of toilets you may be able to access on the way. So obviously info centres, when you're stopping off for a feed of Macca's or the Colonel, servos, that sort of thing, great opportunity there to use the facilities. Overnighter trainers are great. They are a great way to get around. They're great fun. And the bathrooms are awesome. Well, relatively so. Versus short journeys, some you'll be hard pushed to find a toilet on a short, train journey of an hour or two. Pre-arranging flight meals is worthwhile, just so you can actually put your hand up and say, well, this is what works for me from a dietary point of view. Obviously, things expand when you're traveling and with the cabin, the air pressure. So if you avoid the carbonated drinks and things, that'll theoretically reduce less gas at the other end for you. And a little top tip, which isn't totally related to IBD, but a friend of a friend said that she always orders a low sodium diet whenever she flies. And it's not because she has an issue with her blood pressure per se. It's simply that all the special diets come out first, so you get a good feed first up for the rest of the plane. And in her experience, she has yet to receive her low sodium diet tray without a sachet of salt or pepper. So there's a winner. So if you want to get a big feed first, go to the low sodium diet, and you'll probably be rewarded. The other thing too is a lot of, and I'm not sure about New Zealand, but certainly in the UK, they have a lanyard scheme for people with hidden disabilities. So that could be a whole range of conditions, such as IBD, but autism, hard of hearing, a whole range of things. So when crossing through borders or going through various security checks, it can give you a little bit of peace of mind, and gives you a little bit of allowance getting through those places. I think overall, though, certainly in my experience, there's a whole lot more understanding and training of border officials in general. So they're a lot more sensitive to the needs of various travellers. They're not quite so gung ho like they used to be. Just one other final thing when you're on the road. So recently coming into Sydney International, which is a nightmare on a good day. It's generally pretty common now for the half of the world to be there at once in the international terminal. So if nothing else, take a mask. Okay, flu, COVID, respiratory stuff is just going nuts at the moment, and I can be testament to that. I'm just coming off the back end of COVID. Okay, let's crack on because time is short, and I'll very briefly talk about traveller's diarrhea. The main reason being is that it is the most likely scenario for any of us traveling is to cop it with getting the runs. It's a relatively short-lived issue where basically you've got a fever, nausea, vomiting, and you're on the loo 3 or 4 times a day. And it's mostly a bit of an inconvenience, but it can stuff up your best laid plans. So it's spread through bacteria, parasites, and viruses, so the nasties. It can happen anywhere in the world, but more often in high-risk destinations such as sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Central America, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, a lot of places out there. It's spread through eating contaminated poo and water, which isn't much fun. And not typically on the international menu, but it happens without you even realizing it. You start to feel crook a couple of 3 days after having that dodgy poo sandwich. Your symptoms are 2 or 3 days, but generally it's self-limiting, to be fair, and you'll crack on with it. It affects anyone, kids, adults, girls or guys. I'll come back to you on that. If anyone's got any ideas as to whether or not it affects girls or guys more than the other, I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on that. IBD travellers and explorers, immunocompromised individuals, whether it's because they're on meds or because they have a medical condition such as cancer, diabetics, various medications, a whole range of things, anyone effectively. The upshot of it is you feel pretty crap. It's generally okay to self-manage, or you can do that yourself by just having a bland diet, fluids, and just holding up somewhere. So maybe delaying that bungee jump or that overnight bus journey for a day or two. But if things don't improve and if you have any increase in symptoms or anything, you need to get yourself seen to. So how to prevent that in the first place? Well, you could just stay in New Zealand, but that'd be far too boring. So when you're on the road, you just want to make sure there's a few things that you keep in the back of your mind. And most of it's common sense. But often when we're traveling and having a great time, common sense goes out the window. But if you can take away a few things just to stop and think about, it may be worthwhile and save you getting crook. So washing your hands is the obvious, which is great. But the key is that you dry your hands. There's no point in washing them if you don't dry them. Or the other more flexible option or easier option is good old hand sanitizer or gel. I'd be a little cautious of shellfish, any raw veggies and salads, and probably avoid food that's been hanging around a while, like buffet style outfits. Food looks amazing, great colours and things, but it's probably been there several hours. It's been exposed to flies, and we all know about flies and where they like to park up and hang out and get in and out of. The buffet's been handled by many people whose personal hygiene measures may not be up to scratch to yours or better, who knows. So yeah, try and avoid your buffet style meals. Peel in your fruits and veggies where you can. You want to avoid ice and drinks that's stinking hot. You've just been for a swim at the pool. You want a nice cold, mocktail or cocktail, and you just need some ice in there. Best to avoid. If that water's contaminated, that makes the bugs go for a snooze, and they wake up inside your pukanui, and it's all on like Donkey Kong, and you can be pretty miserable. And also where food's been kept warm. So a lot of people ask me about street food, and it's a really good question, and I can understand their concern if that is a good option or not. I mean, it's everywhere, man. In my experience, street food is great, provided it's hot as it's cooked right in front of you, the steam's coming off it. It's generally a safe bet. If it's been bought from round the back somewhere and kind of tastes a bit lukewarm, you'll know straight away that this doesn't, it's not hot. Yeah, you want to stop eating and put your chopsticks down. But in my experience, and for a lot of my good friends and traveling mates, if it's cooked right in front of you, it's hot as the steam's coming off it. It's generally a great feed and cheap as chips. So it is usually a safe bet. Milk products, can be a little bit of an issue, regardless of where you are. And just really briefly talking about what safe water options can be. So bottled water is the standout. It's not the most environmentally sound though, obviously, but it is the safest bet for you. So reasonably okay for short-term travel. Do double check the seal though. It's not unheard of for people to refill bottled water. So if it doesn't snap when you take off the cap, then it may be that you've got some dodgy water in there. Boiling your water is also a great option if you have facilities. If you've got a jug where it is you're staying, you can boil your water, fill up your drink bottle, let it go cool, and you're good to go the next day. So you need to boil your water for at least a minute. And if you're going to clamber up some hills and get pretty high in terms of altitude, you need to increase that boiling time to 3 minutes. And that's just because of the lesser oxygen at altitude. From a portable options, Aquatabs or Aquamira. So these are great. They're just a little tablet, a couple of drops in your water, and you're good to go. So a really good option. And yeah, it's I can't recommend those highly enough. Actually, they're a great little thing to do for water. I've got toothpaste. Okay, toothpaste is okay. But in terms of brushing your teeth, you've done it all your life here in New Zealand or wherever it is you've been brought up. You try and avoid the murder house, so you try and do your proper dental hygiene. You just turn the tap on, don't you? Yeah, you do at home, but you don't when you're away. So you want to reach for that bottled water that is okay, where the cap hasn't been broken, and rinse out or do whatever with that bottled water. So it's those ingrained habits, that common sense stuff that goes out the window. Still feeling crook? Get yourself seen to, okay? Because the problem is that having traveller's diarrhea can mimic the symptoms associated with IBD as well. Now, apologies. This is the one kind of semi-academic slide I have, and it's basically just to reinforce the traveller's diarrhea treatment guidelines. And this comes back from a 2017 paper now, which is still current now. So essentially, lay low, keep your fluids up, bland diet, so bananas, plain rice, toast. If you can, take some time out. This is where having some flexibility in your travel itinerary is invaluable. So you can just hole up somewhere and not ruin the rest of your trip. The other thing is if you can, with yeah, as I say, with your diet, you want to keep it really bland. And with your fluids, water's great, but also some flash sugar and salt. So some electrolytes, salts, and sugars could be worthwhile just to replace those things that are leaving your body when you're on the loo. Um, Loperamide is a diarrhea stopper, so it's a tablet that gives you some relief, which is great, but it doesn't treat anything. So you've got to be really cautious with IBD, in particular if it's a question mark as to whether or not you've got bog standard traveller's diarrhea or you've got something going on in terms of your IBD. So just be cautious with loperamide, and it's something I would talk to your prescribing health professional as to whether or not that is an option to even taking it all with you. For moderate and severe forms of traveller's diarrhea, that's a whole new game, and I won't go into too much detail because this is something you can talk to your travel medicine specialist about. Antibiotics are a possibility, but they're only for a really select few travellers who are getting really remote and well off the beaten track. And as I say, with IBD, you've just got to be a little extra cautious because symptoms are similar and do mimic those of IBD. So traveller's diarrhea, yep, you've got your bog standard there. With IBD, you've got all of that as well as those additional nasties. So your abdo pain, it feels like someone's got their hands in there and ripping your guts out. You're incredibly tired. You've now got bloody poo. You've got a swag of nausea. You've lost a ton of weight and you don't know why, you don't know what's going on. You're feeling pretty miserable. So in that instance, you've really got to get yourself seen to, and that's where that plan of attack in case the shit hits the fan crops up. So you need to get yourself seen to. Essentially, the management is the same whether you have IBD or not, but the ongoing treatment and the key differences, if things are going on for longer, 2 or 3 days, you need to get yourself checked out regardless. Just going to touch very briefly on stoma stuff. So for a lot of people, they do have that bit on the side when they're traveling. So these can be temporary or permanent ostomies. And it depends on what's gone on in your history as to whether or not this has been a requirement. And often people that do have stomas have got incredibly complex health histories just to chuck into the mix when you're traveling. In terms of numbers, there's about roughly 9,000 in New Zealand, possibly more. It's difficult to get accurate figures, to be fair. Over the ditch, they've got a few, in UK, US, worldwide. There's a swag of people that have stomas. So if you don't have one yourself, or you're not traveling with someone that does, odds are you're going to meet someone who does. So yeah, nothing stops you from getting away, even though you have a stoma. And in terms of management when you're on the road, sorry, it's essentially the same. It's just a few other bits and pieces to think about. So as per my previous slide, be bowel aware and know what your baseline is. You will be going to some amazing locations. Potentially, you're going to be eating some amazing kai, but you are going to be eating different stuff. You're going to be eating at different times, different stuff in general. And so this may result in a few changes of bowel habits, which may mean that you need to change your bags more often, where hydration is really, really important so you don't get yourself too dry. And people often ask, well, how do I know if I'm getting dehydrated? And the general rule of thumb is if you're feeling thirsty, have a drink. Okay. If your pee's looking like yellow, you just need to tone that down and get that a little paler. So you want to have a little drink then as well. The other issue too, I think with bag changes and all the different bags are great. There's some for sensitive skin, not so sensitive skin, whatever, hairy skin, you name it, skin. But they are sticky. So our skin is pretty resilient, but if you keep having a crack at it, it starts to wear thin a little bit. So you can end up with some pretty nasty skin rashes and things. So it's important that you take away your powders or your creams or your pads or whatever it is you use just to look after the skin surrounding your stoma as well. As I say, if you've got more bag changes, you're in a hot, sticky environment, these can all compound into being pretty miserable with a localized skin infection. As you do with meds, take a swag away with you, okay? If in doubt, take extra. And there's some people out there that say they'll take twice the amount. So maximise that luggage allowance and get it in there, okay? Like your meds, put some in checked in, some in your carry-on. If you're going on your OE, good old advanced planning, so you can either arrange to get some shipped out wherever you're going to end up, and also liaising with a local supplier and distributor, so you've got things jacked up for when you actually arrive in country. When you're crossing borders, just to move into this, it can be really distressing in terms of having a stoma. In terms of, no one can see it, but you know all about it, and you don't want anyone else to see it. Again, there's these great little cards that you can carry with you, that you can pull out and show to the security staff or whoever it may be, that this is the situation, and just bear that in mind when you're going through those security checks. And unfortunately, they are a big part of travel, and certainly since 9/11. Security is pretty much mainstay across the board, which includes a lot of every airport terminal. So these checks are necessary, and they have some pretty high-tech scanners, and there's a whole screening process involved now. I think overall, though, as I think I mentioned earlier, security staff have had a lot of training, a lot more training now. They have a lot of more awareness and understanding, and are a lot more sensitive to a whole range of health conditions and various things that people may be carrying with them when they're traveling and exploring the world. So if I could say one thing for you, as hard as it is, try not to be embarrassed, be transparent and say, hey, yep, yes, I have a stoma. You do have the right to, if they want to do a pat down search, which will be theoretically a complete random check, or if in fact you are carrying something dodgy, you are entitled to have a private room. So don't be afraid to put your hand up and say, look, I'd like to go off the side here, because in the busy terminal halls, you've got the whole world there. It can feel a little daunting when someone's asking you to spread your arms and legs wide, and you're thinking what's going to happen next. And that card I mentioned as well may be worthwhile and be helpful when you're going through security checks. But look, at the end of the day, border staff, security staff aren't going to give a shit about your ostomy, your stoma bag, no pun intended. They're more interested in the guns and the bugs and the various bugs, biosecurity, your bombs and things like that. So you're the least of their worries, put it that way. Alrighty, just a couple of things about surgery. If you had to have recent surgery for whatever reason, it's pretty standard to have a stand down period of 3 to 4 weeks after any type of surgery. This may be more or less dependent on what has happened, what's going on, your general condition, and future follow-ups and things. So be aware of that if you've got any planning of any traveling happening, is that, if you've got some surgery that you're on the waiting list for, you may need to delay things a wee bit before getting some plans firmed up a little. The other thing too is, accidents can and do happen. It is an unfortunate aspect that I think happens at least once, to be honest. And as, I don't know, some may already do here, have a little emergency kit that you carry around in your handbag or your backpack every day. And that's where you just want to put your essentials in case, things go wrong. It doesn't need to be big, but just chuck in a couple of bags, a spare pair of undies, some alcohol-free wipes, some tissues, pads, whatever works for you, in a disposable bag to put things in if need be. Some people find having a small mirror is a good idea, just to double check that things are all cleaned up and you're good to go. Clothes pegs. I can think what you guys might be thinking. What the heck were they for? They're not to hang out your undies that you've just cleaned and need to dry out, but they're more for holding your clothes up out of the way when you get yourself sorted. And I know about this, and a lot of people probably do, but there's a world famous in Wellington stoma nurse who's since retired, Sue Wally, who, if she wasn't wandering around with some clothes pegs attached to her uniform somewhere, you knew something was wrong. So she was the guru of this. So basically, it means you can pull your clothes out or up onto your shoulder somewhere, so you've got both hands to be able to clear things up and get yourself back on the road again. Saves doing it one-handed, which is no mean feat. Very quickly, deep vein thrombosis, so DVTs. So these are nasty little clots that get stuck in your legs, and can be a risk if that clot then whizzes back up to your heart or to your brain. So we like our blood to go down to our toes and back up to our heart and our brain, because that's where the thinking and pumping goes on. But when we're not doing much, so we're sitting on a flight for 4 hours and we're just sitting there watching the movie and watching, the clouds go by, or we're on a train, we're sitting in the back of a car in a cramped condition, you are at risk of developing a clot. Also, post-surgery, part of that recovery process often is not doing much. So there's lots of periods of inactivity. So that also puts you at risk of a DVT. So it's all about prevention. So you could choose to stay at home, but that's far too boring. So when you're on the plane or the car or wherever it is you may be, like you do for Mozzies, just loose-fitting, comfy clothing. You don't want to put your Levi tight fitting jeans on, because that's no fun for travel in confined places. Keeping your fluids up, because that'll make you get up and go for a pee anyway, up and down the aisle, where the case may be. If you're really involved in that movie, just roll your ankles around, flex out your calf muscles a wee bit. That'll also be helpful. And the other option for some people may be to get some compression socks on board. And the message, the really key thing is, though, don't think, oh, what a bargain on Temu for $2. You actually need these to be fitted properly, either through some pharmacies or travel medicine clinics or GP practices will do that for you. They can be too tight and cause more damage than not. So be really wary of that. And of course, when you stop moving and grooving up and down the aisle, it's important to get back in your seat and get your seatbelt on, because, we all know what happens when turbulence hits. Sun exposure, good old sun. That's why we travel often in the first place, to escape our Kiwi winter. Every one of us is at risk of sunburn and sun exposure. A lot of people that are taking IBD meds are at higher risk of skin sensitivity and cancers. So it's really, really important to do the good old slip, slop, slap, seek, and slide those sunnies on. You want to use sunscreen that's got UV protection and sun protection factor of at least 30. Now, what does that actually mean? So often people go, 30, that must be good. Oh, there's a 40, there's a 50, essentially what it means is, so let's go for 30 plus, and that means that you've got 300 minutes of sun protection, as you more 300 minutes more than what you would have by not having any sunscreen on at all. Okay, so if you've got a 40 plus, you've got 400 minutes. 50 plus, you've got 500 minutes from not using any sunscreen. So 30 is good, so that'll give you a good coverage. And bearing in mind, it's usually the middle part of the day where the sun's the harshest. So between your 11 and 3-ish. The other thing too, it may be worthwhile to have a chat if you're lucky enough to have a dermatologist or a nurse practitioner, or gastroenterologist or your own GP, as there are some funded sunscreen products out there. Sunscreen, unfortunately, is not cheap. It should be, but you can get funded products. But have a chat with your provider first. And just to mention too, as I say, with warmer climates, it's great, it's lovely, and heat is good, but heat exhaustion isn't. So just be mindful of that fluid intake, and not to be out in the sun for too long. So look, essentially that's a wrap tonight, guys. I hope I haven't bored you too much, but we've effectively covered, the good old IBD, and that overall you're a high risk traveller, but overall not much in the whole scheme of things. And why not? You can still travel. There's no gates up there. There's no flashing lights at the airport to say, no, you can't go any further, step back. So get out there, but do take travel insurance, or get travel insurance, and check the small print, and do declare your health history. If you're going to get well off the beaten track, look at getting those jabs and stabs on board and having a chat with a travel medicine provider. We've covered Mozzies, we've covered medication, the paperwork you may not need. To be aware of the difference between traveller's diarrhea and IBD symptoms, or having a flare. Talked a little bit about security and safety, and any anxieties going through border security and passport control. The good old moving and grooving with DVTs. Sun stuff and heat exhaustion. And I haven't mentioned this yet, and I neglected to do so earlier, but look, mental health is just as good as physical health. Okay, so physical health can't do it on its own without good mental health. So just remember, it's okay to talk and it's good to talk. Okay, traveler's diarrhea isn't, but verbal diarrhea is. Okay, we like it when people talk. It's good to share the load. And if that person that you're talking to can't help or whatever, we'll be able to get you to the right people that can, or can just talk things through. It's amazing, just that korero, how far that can go. Just that I love this little picture. I actually took this when I was in China a few haircuts ago, and yeah, I just thought it kind of appealed to my warped sense of humour. But yeah, I don't think you should tramping on any toilets anywhere in the world. But yeah, I just thought that was quite a cute little slide. So yeah, you can go anywhere. There's just a few of the bits and pieces you may want to consider. It's not across the board. It's not a checklist for everybody, but it's just a few things that may be relevant. And take home messages if you get crook, that's what you pay in travel insurance for. Get yourself seen to. It's all part of the game, and all about keeping healthy, and so you enjoy your time and not be miserable. There's a swag of resources out there, and look, I've just dropped in a few here now. The one at the bottom there, NATHNAC, is a great website. It's a British based website. It has a swag of information about travel, and it's country specific and it's free. So can't endorse that website enough. It's a great little, it's a gem. So do check it out if you're going to get a bit off the beaten track. And look, I am rounding things up, I promise. But look, you've heard from me. I'm Briar. And at the age of 15, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which, believe me, was a lot of haircuts ago now. And I won't lie to you, it's been a hell of a journey, and not without its ups and downs and challenges. That first slide about stomas is a picture of my bit on the side. But you know what? I've been really lucky, and I haven't travelled everywhere, man, but I've done a bit. I've ticked a few off, and our planet is amazing, and there's always somewhere to go. And having IBD, it should not be a barrier. I'm no expert, but I do get it, and I can wholeheartedly recommend, as per your good old Dr. Seuss, and I'm showing my age here, that yeah, you can do it. You can get out of there and go explore this amazing, amazing planet Earth. And yeah, so go scale, go conquer your maunga, and you'll be rewarded. And look, absolutely finally, IBD is a condition that affects you without a doubt, affects the individual, but man, it also affects your whānau, your your friends and your family. And they'll be feeling it too. They'll be hurting, and all they want to do is take away some of the crap that you may be going through. They want to love you and support you, and they only ever want the best for you. So don't push them away. I'm so grateful and very, very lucky every day that I've got an amazing, amazing, amazing group of friends and family that are just awesome. They're my rock. And growing up, I just wish if I could take back some of the things I've said, my actions or inactions, I would do it in a heartbeat. Some people that have been very dear to me are no longer here. But you know what? Enough of me, you guys. Thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this evening. I haven't done too much of the verbal diarrheaing, but get out there, go enjoy the world. It's awesome. It's can be a bit dodgy, but let's face it, sometimes the mishaps and the stuff ups on travel often make the funniest travel stories. So don't be afraid to push yourself out there a little bit. Go well. Noho ora mai. Don't let IBD define you or your dreams.
Thank you, Briar. I've just got a couple of questions that popped up. Do you have any
Yep.
advice for those of us who are continuing to be COVID cautious, thinking about masking while traveling, travel insurance that might cover COVID complications, prescriptions for antivirals, etc., while overseas?
Yeah. Yeah, look, as I say, COVID is very much still part of every day, wherever you are in the world. I would certainly recommend wearing masks, particularly when you're going through busy, airport terminals and train journeys, even in New Zealand. We're all sitting ducks, to be honest. Definitely worthwhile. Added added caution would be to get some N90, what we call N95 masks. So they're the supersonic masks per se, so they're a lot more protective. That would be an option. In terms of antivirals, Paxlovid, it is now, you can get Paxlovid. It's available to certain segments of the population. You have to be over the age of 65, or if you are immunocompromised, which may be the case if you're taking some medication for IBD. So the only issue with Paxlovid is that it's only really good if you take it within 5 days of becoming symptomatic. So it may be that your medical provider might be happy to, arrange for a script and you take some with you. That's not a problem. It shouldn't be a problem. But you've just got to be a little bit cautious with its use. And obviously, COVID can be mild to, life-threatening. So you've got to treat it really seriously and not be too blasé.
Cool. And so the other question was, someone else got the yellow fever vaccine in 2003. Is that still valid, or would they need to update that vaccine? Do you know?
No, it's all good. Yeah, so in 2003, 13, did you say, Belinda?
2003.
Okay, no, that's cool. So when that person had it in 2003, it would have been valid till 2013. And that'll say that on that certificate, I'm sure. So it's not a problem. It is now lifelong. People do get a bit anxious and think, oh, but it says 2013 and I'm going through Sudan and they're not going to, accept that. It has been endorsed since 2014, I think. The WHO has declared that this is now lifelong. And there is actually, if you go into the World Health Organization webpage and just chuck in yellow fever certification 10 years or something like that, that'll come up. Otherwise, I can pull it out for you tomorrow or something. I can send it through to you, Belinda. But yeah, it is now lifelong, and you do not require another vaccine.
Okay, great. I think that's pretty much all the questions. Just wanted to follow up. Yes, I am recording this session, so this will be released at a later date. There is also another website I popped in there, which is ibdpassport.com, which also has a lot of great tips on there for traveling with IBD as well. But I really want to thank Briar for coming on tonight and being so candid and so inspiring to just travel the world and not let IBD sort of hold patients back. So thank you, Briar. Really appreciate it.
Oh, look, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And yeah, as I say, I hope I haven't bleated on too long.
That's
I'm usually
okay.
good at that.
And just want to
Awesome.
wish everyone a lovely evening and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Ka kite.